Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk about a milestone in advertising that involves music. Now, the advertising industry is never one to invent a counterculture or a new and novel trend, whether in art, music, or elsewhere. But Madison Avenue does very closely monitor the counterculture and it observes ways and it studies ways that it could manipulate it for its own purposes. And there's always a balancing act when it does so. On the one hand, if they can harness and manipulate the counterculture to sort of win young people over to a big corporate product, that's a win for the shareholders. On the other hand, if they go too far sort of into left field, they might alienate their more mainstream or older generation customers. It's always a fine line that these people have to walk. Cynical, you bet. Calculated, yes, sir. And I think the best example of this ever, and the most successful, was one that took place in 1971, where possibly the most famous commercial ever, certainly the most famous commercial up till then, was made. And it was done in the style of a would-be music video with a song called I'd Like to Buy the World a Coke. Now, the premise of it was that these young sort of clean cut hippies, because, it looks, the people behind us showered, they weren't covered in mud, but, people who were young and hip, were, holding hands and doing the whole kumbaya thing, but they weren't literally singing kumbaya. They were singing a lovey-dovey song about how great it would be to buy the world a Coke. The implication being that world peace would break out, the Cold War would end, the carnage in Vietnam would be over, if only they could get their hands on a Coke. Whether Pepsi could have that same effect on geopolitics wasn't explored at the time. Maybe it should have been. Now, the song itself wasn't commissioned by Coca-Cola. It was written as a song called I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing in Perfect Harmony by Roger Cook and Roger Greenaway. It was originally sung by an obscure singer called Susan Shirley, but the song it caught the ear of the Coca-Cola company, who recommissioned a version of it with the Coca-Cola lyrics in place of I'd like to teach the world to sing, I'd like to buy the world a Coke, and it was recorded both as a single and for the purposes of the commercial by a folk group called the Hillside Singers. Did they sell out? You can be the judge of that. Now, the commercial was successful beyond anyone else's wildest dreams. It was huge. It became a pop culture phenomenon. Everyone knew the words. It was good for Coca-Cola. Sure, about 15 years later, they'd undo all of this goodwill by trying to reinvent Coke, which just goes to show you that attempting to reinvent the world, that sells. Attempting to reinvent the world's most popular soft drink, that will destroy your company. But, they came back. So if you're a Coca-Cola shareholder watching this who was around in the mid 1980s, you can be happy about that. But the ad is so iconic. It's been referenced in so many pieces of satire. It's been remade in various guises over the years. But there's really nothing that's been this iconic because they really struck that wonderfully cynically perfect, call it what you will, balance between counterculture and establishment. It was counterculture enough for it to really sound like a pop song, in spite of the references to Coca-Cola, but it was sort of middle of the road and happy enough so that the message of peace didn't really make some of the older, more socially conservative people think, oh, drink Coca-Cola and you'll join the Viet Cong. It definitely didn't convey that. And again, it was a difficult balance to strike, and propaganda, which is basically just the exaggerated form of advertising, or is it the other way around? It really is an art form. Whether it's the most ethical or not, I'll leave it up to you. It's certainly one that's central to the modern consumer and entertainment experience, and music has played a part in it, so much so that some of the best gigs you can get today as a songwriter or as a performer are doing sessions for commercial work. Go figure, as they say. So, that's the story of the most famous musical commercial and one of the most famous commercials of all time. What did you think of it? Do you remember it? Had you forgotten it? I kind of doubt that. Let me know what you think. And as always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.